Hey, good morning, everybody. How are we doing? I tell you what, there is nothing more exciting to think of every day you wake up and we live near a resource that we live near. Now, there could be a lot of positive, a lot of negatives, but I want to tell you something. Your results will be a lot more positive if we think about what the good parts and what we could do to make it even better than what it is. Again, my name is Matt Tuttle. I'm a professional fisherman. I travel all over the country fishing tournaments, and I get to see a lot of different bodies of water. So I get to see those mecca lakes, like a Lake Eufaula, Oklahoma, that's 105,000 acres. And I've been there 3 times, and I've still fished this much of it. And they have 6-foot waves when the wind blows there. So, I don't call that a lake, that's a small Lake Erie Ocean kind of thing. And so getting to be able to travel around to see all of these different lakes, I still come home and have a huge appreciation for our Grand Lake, because our Grand Lake has some resources that none of these other lakes that I travel to all across the country has, and I'll get to that here in a minute. My relationship, and I call it my relationship with Grand Lake, is just that. Most of you are familiar with Otterbein Retirement Community in the southeast corner of the lake. That's where I grew up. There was regular houses from the church camp, and my mom and dad moved us there, and I was 11 years old. And I liked to fish when we moved there, but after moving there, my love of fishing got real serious. And it was crazy. You look back and you see how things played a role to get you to where you are at today. I had several guys that I met fishing while I was on the bank. I was always bank fishing, 11, 12, 13 years old. I didn't have a bass boat, so I was bank fishing, and I would meet these guys, and they would see me every time they were out. I fished 7 days a week. I didn't miss a day. And when they would come by in their boats, there I am again. And I think some of them thought, well, there ain't no sense fishing against him back here. You might as well just get him in the boat and fish with him. So back then, they would say, you want to jump in the boat and fish these channels with me? And by the time they finished their sentence, I was standing behind them on the deck of the boat going, where are we going? I didn't even think of asking my mom and dad, hey, you okay if I get in the boat with this guy? We have no idea who he is or where he's from. We'll work that out later. So over that period of time, I had these relationships built with these guys that took me under their wing and said, hey, man, here's how we throw a spinnerbait. Hey, here's how we flip a worm. Or, hey, here's how we do this. Not knowing at the time, them pouring into me was going to be later give me the ability to pour into other people. I had no idea. I didn't see that coming. And the love affair that I have with educating people how to fish, and that's why I guide. The other day, when I say the other day, that could be in the last 5 years, so just bear with me. But the other day, I had an 8-year-old little girl and her dad, and they came and stayed at the lake. They'd never seen the lake, and they said, the only thing I've ever been able to help her catch is a little bluegill. And I just want her to catch one crappie. And can I hire you to help my daughter catch one crappie? And I said, Lord, this better be one of these days we catch them today. And we go out, and the first little boat lift I came up to, she made 15 pitches to that boat lift, and she had 15 crappie in the boat. And she's looked back at her dad, and she says, I'm sorry, I forgot you were there. And at the end of that day, she was so excited, and she says, Dad, we can go now to our lake. They lived in Cincinnati. We can now go to that lake. I think we can catch them now. I think we can catch those crappies. And of course, they left with a handful of jigs and hooks and bobbers and stuff to be able to go catch those fish. And about 2 weeks later, he sent me a picture of her holding a crappie from a local lake down around the Cincinnati area. And I'm like, those are the moments that I even still, at my age, I go, wow, I didn't see that coming. I didn't see that coming, because when I was being poured into, I was looking at, hey, I don't own a boat. I just want to get in a boat. I'll jump in anybody's boat. Let's go. And when they were teaching me to have patience, to have grace, and to have just time. Just give time. And I say to a lot of folks, I professionally fish. I fish for a living. And they're like, how in the world do you fish for a living? Your wife must have a really good job. And yeah, it's a pretty cool gig, but I fish for a living because I've also entered into relationships with local companies and national companies that believe in me, and what we're trying to achieve is giving back to the youth and giving back to people. I don't care if you're 90 or you're 9. If you don't know how to catch a crappie or you don't catch them very well, I want you to leave me being able to go catch them later. And that is the whole, what's the saying? Give a fish to a person they eat for a day, but you teach them how to fish, they eat for a living or for a lifetime. And I know I butchered that, but that whole thing, that whole premise is those people were able to go catch fish another day without me, and the smiles on their face were amazing. And I did not ever get consumed by the negative in life growing up. I didn't have time for drugs and alcohol and all the negative stuff and all. I don't have those stories. Man, when I was young, I was crazy. I don't have that. My story is I had a crazy day one time in 1996 in 6-footers on Lake Erie. I was scared out of my mind, holding on to handles I couldn't even find. And when we got back to the dock, the guy who was driving the boat, he goes, well, that was good, huh? I was still trying to remember who I was. I was scared. When you go down into a swell or into the trough and you look all around you is nothing but water, I got a problem with that. I said, how did you know where you were going? He says, when I got to the top, I just looked around and went back down in. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I was experiencing that as a young man. I had a girl, my dating career was this. I had a girl, she goes, hey, you want to go out on a date? I said, sure, when? And she'd say, well, let's go out Friday night. I said, can we be done by 7? And she's like, 7? I said, well, I got a tournament in the morning. I said, I can't be out late. So when I was walking through the high schools of St. Mary's, that's where I graduated from, it was carrying Bassmaster magazine, a notebook, and a highlighter. And it wasn't for highlighting English notes or math notes. It was Denny Brower mentioned how to skip a jig up underneath the dock in 6 foot of water and work that jig out. Maybe even sometimes swim that jig out. I had that highlighted, and I still have that magazine. So my love affair with fishing started very early, and my love affair with Grand Lake St. Mary's started very, very early. Let me ask you a question. Has any of you ever went out at night, real late at night, maybe 11 o'clock at night, there's no wind, the lake is froze? And some people are like, what are you doing outside when it's like that? Well, I'm talking it's real cold, but it's real calm. And have you ever stood at the lake's edge and just be quiet and listen? That lake will talk to you and I know it's like, well, this guy's nuts. But the lake is making all kinds of awesome, beautiful noises. It's unbelievable. When the ice cracks, now I'm going to say this, now keep with me. When the ice cracks, that's a good sound because that's the lake making ice. Okay, you want to hear that lake cracking. Now, if it's under your feet, you do whatever you got to do to get to the bank. Okay, but when you hear that lake cracking and that, I mean, it'll be amazing. Just take this winter when that lake freezes, and especially first ice, and just go out at night and just put your ear to the lake and just remember we talked about this today. And that's something, the other night we had the Northern Lights. And so here in our area, Ohio, we have such amazing things going on around our lake that we sometimes go, oh, it's our lake. It don't have no water in it. Oh, it doesn't have this. It doesn't have that. But I'm going to tell you something. The eagle population on this lake, I will put against any lake in the country. When I'm out, I usually ask kids. I do a lot of work with kids, and I'll ask them, how many days are in a year? And they'll 365. Well, I fish 280 of those. 280 days a year, I'm fishing. I'm on the water. And when I tell you that There is no more eagles anywhere. I mean, the eagle population here is amazing, and my guide clients will risk life and limb to get a picture of an eagle. They're leaning over the edge of my boat. I'm like, hey, get in here. I'm gonna put a life jacket on you. Keep that up. Now, daggone it. One of the other things, and I had a guide trip where they said, we don't want to fish. My dad was here at the lake in the 50s, and he's not been back since. And I just want to take him one last trip. He was 90 plus years old. He wants to do one more trip, and it took both of us to get him in my boat. And we got him in the boat, and they just wanted to ride around. And they had those disposable cameras. And they were wearing them things out. They had a whole bag of them. And they're just click, click. And they said, there's one thing that we want to go look at in particular. We want to go see the oil derrick. I'm like, right on. And they were talking about, they read up on the history. They knew this was the first offshore oil rig right here at Grand Lake, St. Mary's. Those folks paid me. They brought revenue in to come see that pile of rock. And they said, that's one of the most, and they wore out 2 of those disposable cameras, taking pictures. I mean, of just that pile of rock with the oil rig thing. And there I am. I had always just taken it for granted. You know how many times I've driven past that? I fished it. I have fished that a bunch. There's fish out there in the summertime bass fishing, bro. I'm just letting you know. But I have fished it. I mean, I have done it. And I didn't take it, but these people came and had an agenda. And they're like, I want to see that. So I got to take them out there and experience that with them. And they wrote back about 3 months later that Dad passed. But they put the pictures with him in his casket. I mean, I was just like, it's unbelievable. His love affair, my love affair. People pour it into me. People pour it into me to be around, and this lake has so much to offer. And man, has there been some ups and downs. But that's still my lake. And the Lake Improvement Association comes along and have done amazing, amazing work. And I'm not saying that just because I'm standing here. I'm saying it's amazing work because I can see the effects. You want to know what the water temperature on the lake is 5 days out of 7? Just let me know. I'll tell you. I'm out there. And I see the effects. I see now main lake lily pads. Have anybody seen the main lake lily pads? I'll be throwing a frog in that, even though I'm a crappie fisherman. I got a frog rod in the box. And I'll be throwing a frog in those lily pads. Now, hey, may or may not have thrown it over the rock wall, Prairie Creek, into the pads. That was for a YouTube video I'll explain later. But I'm just saying, the works that are being done by the Lake Improvement Association is amazing, amazing, amazing. And without it, I'd be real nervous to where we'd be at today. Now I want to talk about the fishing a little bit. Back in the 90s, I don't know if anybody's old enough in here to remember the 90s, but in the 90s, the crappie fishing on Grand Lake was at a level that you would have to experience it for yourself to remember. And the perch fishing. I may or may not have missed a couple of days of school because of the perch fishing. Because I told my mom, they only bite a certain time of the year. This is like a season. This is like a deer season. I can't miss. And one of my senior government teachers, he says, you been getting any of them perch? I said, yeah. And he says, you think I can get some of them perch from you? I said, yeah. And I brought a cooler in, and he has since passed, so I can tell this story. But Mr. Jeff Janitis, was my government teacher, St. Mary's. And my midterm grade went from a C- to a B+. I said, those perch drop-offs can become weekly, if you know what I mean. I know you like perch. I can bring them in. But I tell you, we could all tell stories back when we went to school or what, things were just different. But my love affair with this lake, it runs so deep. I had a 7-year-old autistic boy out on the boat with me, and his dad was real protective, and I'm glad. I'm glad he was real protective. And I said, hey man, have you ever shot a jig up underneath the dock? And all the kid would do was just smile. He was just kind of like a half smile. And we get to this dock, and I take it, and I said, watch this. And I shoot that jig up underneath that dock, and the crappie just crushed it. And I hand him the rod, and he does this. Ah, 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 and he reels and reels, and he gets it in. By the middle of the day, he's boat flipping those crappies. He caught on real quick. He's just like, ha ha, putting them in there. And his dad was on the back deck, and he was just pointing at his dad. By the end of the day, he's got the jig in his hand. He's shooting up underneath the dock, and he's catching the crappie. Fishing bridges so many gaps, and it's unbelievable, the gaps that it bridges. You know, we look at a kid or a human being or an adult and say, these are your limitations. But when it comes to fishing, you take those limitations off, because anything is possible. As long as we have the patience to want to pour into those people. I was at the West Bank boat ramp the other day, and I'm overwhelmed and just humbled by the number of people that read my articles that I write for the Daily Standard and for Grand Lake Visitor Center. And they said, hey, you said you were catching them out of skate beds. I said, I am. He says, those private or are they open to public? Because I'm not catching them. And I said, you see those right over there along that rock wall? He says, yeah. I says, they're in those stake beds over there. He rolls his window up, drives away. Didn't he say goodbye? So I finished getting my boat ready to put in. By the time I'm idling across, he's holding up a crappie. He says, I got to take it all back. You're telling the truth. Those are the times that make what I do for a living worth the days that when I don't have a guide trip and it's raining and the wind's blowing sideways, you'll see a truck and trailer in the parking lot. That's mine. Because what we want people to do to come, when they come to our area, we want them to have an experience that they've never experienced before. Maybe something they didn't see coming. Wow, I saw 15 eagles today. I didn't see that coming. I saw some goofy big guy in a boat waving at me. Have a good day. I didn't see that coming. It could be any of the littlest or the biggest things. But at the end of the day, what I do out here on the water, fishing and all that kind of thing, that's minute. What people come to Grand Lake and what they get to experience, that's why the Lake Improvement Association is so important. Is because when they come, there's some benches that used to not be there. There's a playground equipment that used to not be there. There's these walk paths that used to not be there. There's all these things that used to not be there because I remember not seeing them. I've been in channels where Lake Improvement Association members, they're dragging timber out of the channelways or they're out of the lake so people don't hit them with their boats. And maybe that goes on other places, but I don't see it. But I sure see it here. I see people who are in love with this lake and they take care of this lake. And yes, again, there are people who are not going to get their hands dirty, will complain, but that's okay. We know what's going on. We know how hard work that's going on and being poured into this lake. You think about the effort and the hours and the money that's being poured into this lake that we have no idea of what the returns will be 30, 40, 50 years from now. Well, Lake Improvement Association and other contributors around the lake are pouring into this lake so we can have a wonderful, beautiful lake for our grandchildren's and our grandchildren's grandchildren. See, we can't be selfish about this lake, can we? Now, I make a living off this lake. But I also want to put back to this lake. I want to invest back into this lake. Because this lake is worth it. All of the work that's going on around the lake. You know, I heard somebody say about deer walking by when they were fishing. How many have seen deer swimming in Grand Lake? And how many times did you say, well, that wasn't neat? Man, I shut the boat off, put the power poles down. I'm like, where's he going? Check this out. You can see the deer slides on the banks, you don't see them as much now because we haven't had rain since 3 years ago, but you can tell where the deer are sliding in and out of the lake, kind of thing. And when I'm idling through a creek and I see 3 little heads bobbing in the water, and I'm like, no way, I get to see this, I get to catch this. And one time I had 2 guy clients, it was a husband and a wife, and I go, guys, my rates just went up, check this out. And there was 8 deer crossing the creek. And man, you talk about, they about dropped their phones in the lake. The lady ended up on her belly on the front deck of my boat because she fell. I'm like, slow down. I didn't mean to get everybody excited. But that's all going on when people are, what is there to do on the lake? Oh, we're having a time. I go, I don't know what you all are doing, but we're out having a time. And Grand Lake is such a special lake. So I drive to a lake that's 15 hours away to go fish a tournament. It's called Grenada Lake, Mississippi. And Grenada Lake has 3-pound crappies in it. Giant crappies. I had 5 crappies that weighed just under 10 pounds, and I wasn't even close. It was 5 crappies that weighed 15 and a half pounds to take day. That's 5 crappies. I'll repeat that. But they don't have what Grand Lake's got. If I decided I was hungry and wanted to stop in and get a pizza, I wanted to stop in and get a sandwich, can't do that on that lake. You got to load up and drive 20 minutes in one direction if you want to go find some food. But Grand Lake, my wife will say, hey, you going to pack a lunch? I said, nope, I'm not packing a lunch on purpose. Because I'm going to It's It, or I'm going to Bayview, or I'm going to Boardwalk. You could fish every day and have a different option. What a blessed opportunity that is to be able to incorporate your family. Anytime my wife gets in the boat with me, it's coming during the day or coming at the end. We're going to eat somewhere. That's just what's going to happen. And that's okay. If you can't tell, I enjoy that too. So she'll say, hey, I'm in the mood for a tenderloin, or I'm in the mood for pizza, or I'm in the mood for this. And I guide us to the right restaurant that has, maybe they favor in it. And we have a great experience. My guide clients will say, hey, where could we grab lunch after the trip's over? And I said, what are you thinking? And I send them to where maybe they'll get the best of that kind of food. I can't do that anywhere else. You ever went to Indiana Lakes and looked around for some place to run up to get a sandwich? Doesn't happen. But on our Grand Lake, I could be going on a Sunday afternoon, going in between 2 spots and hear this music playing. I'm like, what in the world? Somebody's got their radio up loud. Nope, that's just our Boaters Beach with a pontoon and a generator and a whole bunch of people having a great time. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, do I appreciate the jet skis trying to jump my wake as I'm running? Well, that's just part of it. But I'm going to tell you, to see what we have available at our Grand Lake is just an awesome, awesome, awesome opportunity to show off what we have. So I want to encourage you that when you're talking to somebody about Grand Lake and maybe they've never heard about Grand Lake, I want you to start off with 5 positives before you talk about the first negative. And then let me know if you ever get to that negative. The first positive is just take a look. For those of you on camera, I pointed that way because that's where the lake's at. Just take a look at what that amazing resource we have. And then I tell my guide clients, that was hand dug. They're like, no way. I said, yeah, I wasn't part of that. I don't care how much whiskey they was giving out. we ain't gonna be a part of that at all. But I'm so glad they did. And do you think any of those people that did that are alive today? Well, what were they pouring into? Now, they were trying to do something for the Miami-Erie Canal. I get that. But what were they pouring into? Were they working on something bigger than themselves? I think so. Working on something bigger than themselves, and that's exactly what the Lake Improvement Association is doing. That's what the state parks are doing. That's what all these folks, all these contributors are working on something that's bigger than themselves so we can have something special later. That picture of the guy in the top left-hand corner and the picture in the bottom right-hand corner, you may not be able to see it very well, but we do a lot of work with veterans and first responders. I'm partnered with a company called American Hero Hunt, and we take veterans and first responders out fishing. And they don't have to do anything, pay for anything. They don't have to, they ain't nothing. You just get in the boat and we go fishing. And that guy, he talks about, man, I crappie fished all the time. And he has that, I catch a crappie, and it's about the size of that one Cody Deaton was holding. They got a $1,000 tag fish, and he's just beside himself. I said, what's the biggest crappie you ever caught? He goes, I'm looking at it. I said, oh, we're in for a treat today. And he went to catching them about every other cast. And we were about 2 hours into it. He says, I have to sit down. I said, oh, hey, take a break. Do whatever you need to do. He says, no, I'm not tired. He goes, I got to call my best friend that I fish with all the time. He's not going to believe this. And he sits down in the boat, and he calls his friend, puts him on speakerphone. And he's like, oh my gosh. He said, that's the most amazing trip. I've never seen crappie bite like this. This is great. This is great. And the guy says, hang up, dummy. Get back to fishing. And so he hangs up, and we get back to fishing, and we just catch him. At the end of the day, we had a fish fry for him, and we didn't fry the fish we caught. We cleaned those up and gave them to them so they could take them home with them. We had other fish, and we had a fish fry. And that guy, a retired Marine, hugs me and says, with tears, best day of my life. I was poured into. And it's my responsibility to pour back into people. Let's pour into Grand Lake. Let's pour into Lake Improvement Association for people to come from years and years and years. I'll give a little bit of a fish tip. You want to go catch them right now. You want to fish the boat lifts, and you want to fish the fronts of the boat lifts, and you want to fish about almost just up off the bottom. Now I'm using purple and chartreuse. Some of you, if you read the articles, you know I like purple and chartreuse because it just flat works. But don't be afraid to fish just up off the bottom for these crappies. As it gets colder, and we have average nights in the low 40s, they'll go shallow. So you'll be fishing the backsides of those lifts. And then when it gets real cold, and it stays cold, and we think the waters are going to freeze, they're going to be staging up out in the middle of the channel, and it's going to be just a whack fest. And you can catch them. Take somebody fishing. Take them outside, even if you don't fish. Point out the eagles. Point out the blue herons. If you guys are familiar, we have a place called In Between the Chicks. It's in between Big Chick and Little Chick. And then down Big Chick, you'll see all those blue heron nests. And there's some days it looks like a blue heron airport. And I've had grown men, that's the coolest thing they've ever seen. Take somebody out, just let them look. Let them take a walk. Show them how beautiful outside is. And I'll leave you with this, that I always leave the end of my articles. Get out and enjoy our beautiful Grand Lake. Thank you, guys.